Step aside, now!
Lower your voice. The detector didn't alert. State your reason.
You're being selected. Move!
Selection requires cause. Identify your policy.
It's a random check. Cooperate immediately. Now!
Officer.
Sir, step over here.
TSA Supervisor Henry Smith thought he was protecting national security when he saw a black man in a Navy SEAL dress uniform approaching the security checkpoint at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Every biased instinct told him this couldn't be real. Stolen valor. Fake uniform. Possible terrorist impersonating military. In his mind, ordering a full tactical detention was justified. Code red security alert, backup units, armed response. He had spent 19 years with TSA building what he called instincts for spotting threats. But when he intercepted Lieutenant Commander Ruben Igwe, a decorated Navy SEAL carrying official Pentagon travel orders and wearing a chest full of medals, including the Navy Cross for valor under fire, he made a catastrophic miscalculation. What Smith didn't know was that Igwe had just returned from a classified 8-month deployment in Yemen. And every second of what followed was captured on 14 different cameras throughout the terminal, 47 civilian phones, and 6 body cameras worn by responding officers. The very surveillance systems meant to protect travelers would become the evidence that sent Smith to federal prison and cost the government $22.7 million. December 22nd, 2 days before Christmas, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport was chaos. 247,000 passengers moving through terminals, families rushing to make connections, soldiers heading home for the holidays. Terminal D security checkpoint processed 89 travelers per minute during peak hours. Thousands of witnesses surrounded by hundreds of cameras capturing everything in sharp detail. It was the worst possible place to commit a civil rights violation, and the best possible place to document one. Lieutenant Commander Ruben Igwe was born in Chicago's South Side to Nigerian immigrant parents who had sacrificed everything for the American dream. His grandfather, Samuel Igwe, had served in Korea with the segregated army units, earning a Bronze Star while fighting for a country that didn't fully accept him. His father, Emmanuel, had deployed to Desert Storm as a Marine gunnery sergeant. Military service wasn't just a career in the Igwe family. It was a sacred tradition passed down through generations. Ruben had enlisted at 18, determined to push himself beyond any limit. He completed BUD/S training, the brutal 6-month Navy SEAL selection program with a 75% dropout rate, finishing top of his class. For 14 years, he had served in the most elite special operations unit in the world. 3 combat deployments: Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, missions so classified that even his family didn't know where he was or what he was doing. His Navy Cross, the second highest valor award in the Navy, came from an ambush in Syria where he had carried 2 wounded teammates across 400 meters of open ground under enemy fire, then returned for 4 more, 6 lives saved. His body still carried the shrapnel. Now, after 8 months in Yemen, he was finally coming home. His daughter, Amara, 7 years old, thought he was still deployed. His ex-wife, Denise, had arranged the surprise. He wore his dress blues with every medal he had earned because his Pentagon travel orders required it. He never imagined that uniform would make him a target. Henry Smith had built his 19-year TSA career on what he called instincts. His supervisors called it proactive screening. His colleagues had another name for it. Behind his back, staff at Terminal D called him the profiler. Everyone knew which passengers Smith would flag. Everyone knew the pattern, and everyone stayed silent. The numbers told the story. Over the previous 3 years, Smith had personally flagged 847 passengers for enhanced screening. Internal data obtained during discovery revealed that 89% were people of color, black men traveling in business attire, brown families with American passports, anyone who didn't fit Smith's mental image of a legitimate traveler. He had been named in 31 formal complaints alleging racial profiling and discriminatory treatment. Not a single one had resulted in meaningful discipline. His supervisors praised his vigilance while quietly settling one lawsuit for $45,000 with a confidentiality agreement that buried the evidence. Internal emails showed supervisors were fully aware of his behavior. One message from his direct manager read, "Henry flags a lot of passengers, but his instincts have caught contraband before. Let him work." Another email, responding to a discrimination complaint, stated, "Smith operates within discretionary guidelines. No action required." The system had protected him for nearly 2 decades. Smith had developed a particular obsession with what he called stolen valor cases. He believed he could spot fake military credentials instantly, especially when worn by minorities. He had stopped 14 black service members over 5 years, demanding additional verification, calling their patriotism into question. None had been fraudulent. He had never once stopped a white service member for the same scrutiny. December 22nd, 2:47 p.m., Terminal D security checkpoint. The holiday rush created a river of travelers snaking through rope lines, families juggling luggage and children, business travelers checking phones impatiently. 8 overhead cameras recorded the checkpoint from multiple angles. Audio systems designed to detect verbal threats captured every conversation. The afternoon sun streamed through the terminal's massive windows, flooding the space with natural light that made the camera footage crystal clear. Smith stood at his elevated supervisor station, scanning the approaching passengers with practiced suspicion. His eyes locked on the figure moving through the priority screening line. A black man in a Navy SEAL dress uniform, the distinctive navy blue adorned with gold insignia and ribbons. A chest full of medals that caught the overhead lights. The unmistakable Navy cross hanging below rows of service ribbons, walking with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every decoration. Smith's jaw tightened. No way, that's real. The checkpoint audio system captured his words perfectly, his voice dripping with disbelief. He stepped down from his station, something he rarely did for routine screenings. Lieutenant Commander Igwe approached the document check podium, Pentagon travel orders in hand, Navy ID ready. Everything by the book, everything legitimate. Smith intercepted him before the screening agent could process his credentials. "I'll handle this one." His body blocked the normal lane, forcing Igwe to stop. "I need to see your identification, military credentials, and travel authorization." Igwe's expression remained calm, professional, the composure of a man who had faced enemy fire without flinching. He handed over his Navy ID, his passport, and his official Pentagon travel orders bearing authentication stamps and a verification phone number. Smith examined each document, his eyes scanning for any flaw, any inconsistency. There were none. The ID was genuine. The passport was valid. The Pentagon orders were authentic, complete with the official seal and a direct verification line. Everything checked out. Any reasonable officer would have cleared him through. Instead, Smith's face hardened. "These look forged. High quality, but forged. I'm calling for backup." He reached for his radio, his voice carrying across the checkpoint, loud enough for dozens of travelers to hear. Code red, Terminal D checkpoint. Possible stolen valor. Suspected forged military documents. I need armed response immediately. The code red alert triggered an immediate armed response. Within 90 seconds, 6 DFW airport police officers converged on Terminal D checkpoint, hands on holstered weapons, faces tense with adrenaline. Travelers scrambled backward, parents pulling children close, the orderly security line dissolving into chaos. The overhead cameras captured the scene from 8 different angles, every moment preserved in high-definition clarity. "On the ground! Now!" The lead officer's command echoed through the terminal. His body camera recorded the view directly ahead. Lieutenant Commander Reuben Igwe, standing motionless in his Navy SEAL dress uniform, hands already raised, medals glinting under the fluorescent lights. Igwe dropped to his knees, slowly, deliberately, the movements of a man trained to survive hostile situations. He lowered himself face down onto the cold terminal tile, his Navy cross pressing into the floor, his ribbons scraping against ground that thousands of feet had crossed that day. 6 officers surrounded him, weapons drawn, body cameras capturing every angle of a decorated war hero being treated like a terrorist. Smith stood back, arms crossed, watching with satisfaction. His voice carried across the checkpoint, loud enough for everyone to hear. Stolen valor, possible terrorist threat. We caught him trying to board with forged military documents. The travel orders lay scattered where they had fallen. The Pentagon verification phone number clearly visible on the authenticated letterhead. Not a single officer thought to call it. Passengers had their phones out, recording, documenting. At least 47 civilian videos would later be collected as evidence, capturing the humiliation from every conceivable angle. A black man in full military dress uniform handcuffed on an airport floor 2 days before Christmas, while hundreds of travelers watched in horror. "Officers," Igwe said calmly, his voice steady despite the knee pressed into his back. "I am Lieutenant Commander Ruben Igwe, United States Navy. Active duty. SEAL Team 4. Those documents are authentic. Call the Pentagon number on my orders. They will verify." Nobody called. 3 miles away, in the arrivals terminal, 7-year-old Amara Igwe held her mother's hand, bouncing with excitement. The flight status board showed her father's plane had landed 40 minutes ago. Any moment now, he would walk through those doors. The surprise she had kept secret for 2 weeks was finally happening. "Daddy's coming," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the automatic doors. "He's really coming home." The windowless detention room measured 10 feet by 12 feet, concrete walls painted institutional gray, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, a single camera mounted in the corner, its red light blinking steadily, recording everything. The audio system captured every word spoken within those walls with perfect clarity. Igwe sat in handcuffs for 4 hours and 17 minutes. Smith entered the room periodically, each visit documented on the detention room footage. His questions weren't investigations, they were accusations. "Where did you get this uniform? Who made these documents? What organization are you working with?" "Officer," Igwe repeated with measured patience, "call the number on my Pentagon orders. They will verify my identity in minutes. I am an active duty Navy SEAL. I have the highest security clearances in the military. This can be resolved with 1 phone call." Smith's response was captured in damning clarity. "Anyone can print fake documents. Anyone can buy a costume. I've seen this before. You people think you can just put on a uniform and nobody will question it. You people." The words hung in the air, recorded for posterity. Igwe's phone had been confiscated. He couldn't call his command. He couldn't contact his ex-wife to explain why he hadn't appeared at arrivals. He couldn't tell his daughter that Daddy was coming, just delayed. 3 hours into the detention, Amara was crying in the arrivals terminal. The flight had landed ages ago. Every other passenger had come through. Her father wasn't there. Maybe he didn't want to come home. Maybe something happened. Maybe he was never coming. Denise held her daughter, fighting her own panic, calling Ruben's phone over and over, straight to voicemail every time. Inside the detention room, Smith finally ran Igwe's credentials through the federal database. The results should have ended everything immediately. The screen populated with classified flags, restricted access warnings, and security clearance indicators that only legitimate military personnel with the highest authorizations would possess. Any competent officer would have recognized this as absolute proof of legitimacy. Instead, Smith panicked. He picked up the phone and called the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. "I have a suspected terrorist in custody at DFW," he reported, his voice captured on the detention room audio. Black male with sophisticated forged military documents and what appears to be a fabricated classified identity. He's got the whole system fooled. I need immediate federal intervention. The FBI agent who took the call was a 15-year veteran named Samuel Richardson. His first question was simple. "Did you call the Pentagon verification number on his travel orders?" Silence. "Those documents have authentication stamps and a direct line," Richardson continued. "Did you attempt any standard military credential verification before detaining this individual for 4 hours?" More silence. Richardson called the Pentagon himself. The verification took 11 minutes. Lieutenant Commander Ruben Igwe, Navy SEAL Team 4, active duty, Navy Cross recipient, currently traveling on official orders following an 8-month classified deployment in Yemen. One of the most decorated special operators in the United States military. Richardson's voice went cold. Release him, immediately, and don't let anyone involved in this detention leave that airport. FBI agent Samuel Richardson arrived at DFW Airport within 40 minutes, still wearing the Marine Corps ring he'd earned 22 years earlier. He had served 2 tours in Iraq before joining the Bureau. He understood military service, he understood sacrifice, and he understood exactly what had been done to Lieutenant Commander Igwe. The detention room camera captured Richardson's entrance, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to barely contained fury as he saw a decorated Navy SEAL still sitting in handcuffs, dress uniform wrinkled from hours on a concrete floor, medals askew on his chest. "Take those off, now." Richardson's voice left no room for negotiation. The audio recording captured every word. "This man is a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. He has a Navy Cross. He has security clearances higher than anyone in this building, and you've had him in handcuffs for over 4 hours because you couldn't make a phone call?" Smith stammered, his confidence evaporating. "The documents look suspicious. I was following protocol." "Protocol?" Richardson stepped closer, his body camera recording Smith's face. "Protocol is calling the verification number printed on official Pentagon orders. Protocol is not detaining a war hero because you decided a black man couldn't possibly be a Navy SEAL." The TSA Federal Security Director arrived 15 minutes later, summoned by Richardson's demand. Patricia Holloway had overseen DFW operations for 6 years. She walked into the detention room and stopped cold. The camera captured her expression as she processed the scene. A decorated military officer in dress blues, wrists red from handcuffs, surrounded by the evidence of catastrophic failure. What Richardson told her next made her face go pale. The Pentagon had been calling for 2 hours. Igwe's commanding officer had tried to reach TSA the moment he learned of the detention. Every call had been ignored or redirected. NCIS was aware. The Secretary of the Navy's office was aware. By the time Richardson arrived, this incident had reached the highest levels of military leadership. Igwe stood slowly when the handcuffs were finally removed. His uniform was creased and wrinkled, pressed into concrete for hours. One of his medals, a Bronze Star earned in Afghanistan, had been bent when officers forced him to the ground. He straightened his ribbons with quiet dignity, saying nothing, his silence more damning than any accusation. Richardson personally escorted him to the arrivals terminal. The walk took 7 minutes through busy airport corridors, travelers staring at the Navy SEAL in rumpled dress blues accompanied by an FBI agent. Richardson's body camera recorded every step, every glance, every whispered comment from passers-by. Amara saw him first. She had cried herself into exhaustion, slumped against her mother in a plastic airport chair, convinced her father wasn't coming. Then she looked up. "Daddy!" She ran. Igwe dropped to his knees and caught her, holding his daughter for the first time in 8 months. Denise approached slowly, her eyes moving from his wrinkled uniform to his reddened wrists to his face. Something was wrong. Something had happened. Amara pulled back, her small hands touching his wrists where the handcuff marks were still visible. Her voice was captured on Richardson's body camera, innocent confusion mixed with fear. "Daddy, why are you wearing handcuffs?" Igwe had faced enemy combatants without flinching. He had carried wounded teammates through gunfire. He had endured torture, resistance training. But his daughter's question broke something inside him. The camera recorded his eyes filling with tears, his jaw trembling as he searched for words that wouldn't come. The evidence against Henry Smith wasn't just substantial. It was overwhelming, unprecedented. The kind of documentation that civil rights attorneys dream about and defendants have nightmares over. 14 official cameras had captured the incident. 8 terminal surveillance cameras recorded the checkpoint confrontation, the code red response, the armed officers surrounding a man in military dress uniform. 6 body cameras worn by responding DFW airport police officers documented the detention from ground level, capturing Igwe's face pressed into tile, his medals scraping against the floor, his calm voice repeating that he was active duty Navy. But the official footage was only the beginning. 47 civilian phone videos were collected through social media monitoring and legal subpoenas. Travelers had recorded from every angle, uploading to Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram before they even left the terminal. The videos went viral within hours. By the time Igwe was released, the hashtag number Navy SEAL detained had been viewed 4.7 million times. In total, investigators compiled 23 hours of footage from multiple perspectives, all in high definition, all with clear audio. There was no angle left undocumented, no moment unrecorded, no possible dispute about what had happened. The audio evidence was equally damning. Checkpoint microphones had captured Smith's initial words, "No way, that's real." Radio traffic recordings revealed his code red call, blackmail, fake military uniform, high threat. Detention room audio preserved every accusation, every refusal to verify, every instance of the phrase, "you people." Internal TSA communications showed that no verification attempt had been made for 3 hours and 47 minutes. Smith had access to military credential databases. He had the Pentagon phone number printed on authenticated documents. He had chosen not to use any of them. Discovery revealed Smith's 31 prior complaints. Pattern evidence emerged showing years of discriminatory enforcement. Statistical analysis demonstrated his targeting of minority travelers. The $45,000 quiet settlement was unsealed. The internal emails showing supervisor knowledge became public record. Expert witnesses would later testify that standard military credential verification takes 4 to 7 minutes through official channels. The Pentagon logs confirmed their verification line had never been called until FBI agent Richardson intervened, 4 hours and 17 minutes after Igwe's detention began. The medical records added another dimension to the damages. Igwe, who had served 14 years in special operations without psychological incident, was hospitalized for severe PTSD episode 3 days after the airport detention. The trauma of being treated like a terrorist in his own country, in front of hundreds of witnesses, while wearing the uniform he had nearly died for, had triggered a crisis that required inpatient treatment. His psychiatrist's notes, submitted as evidence, described a decorated warrior who now flinched at airport announcements, who couldn't wear his dress uniform without panic attacks, who had nightmares about being face down on cold tile while his daughter waited for a father who never came. The FBI opened a formal civil rights investigation within 72 hours of Igwe's release. Agent Richardson personally supervised the case, assembling a team of 12 investigators who began collecting evidence from every available source. The scope expanded rapidly as the magnitude of Smith's conduct became clear. The Department of Homeland Security Inspector General launched a parallel inquiry into TSA practices at DFW Airport. Investigators discovered that Smith's 31 prior complaints had been systematically dismissed without meaningful review. Supervisors had documented awareness of his targeting patterns and done nothing. The institutional failure ran deeper than one rogue officer. Congressional attention came within a week. Senator Eleanor Vance, who chaired the Armed Services Committee, issued a public statement demanding answers. A decorated Navy SEAL with a Navy Cross was detained for 4 hours at an American airport because a TSA supervisor decided a black man couldn't possibly be a military hero. This is not a security protocol, this is racial profiling, and it happened under federal authority. The Navy issued its own formal statement defending Igwe's distinguished service. Lieutenant Commander Igwe represents the highest ideals of the United States Navy. His record is exemplary. His sacrifice for this nation is beyond question. We are deeply disturbed by his treatment and fully support any investigation into this incident. Smith was placed on administrative leave the day after the incident. He was terminated 3 weeks later when the investigation confirmed he had violated every applicable protocol, but termination was only the beginning. A federal grand jury convened 2 months after the incident. Prosecutors presented evidence of willful civil rights violations, not mere negligence or poor judgment. The footage, the audio recordings, the pattern evidence from prior complaints, the refusal to make a simple verification call, all pointed to deliberate discrimination. The indictment came down with devastating force. Henry Smith was charged with deprivation of rights under color of law under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. The charges carried a maximum sentence of 10 years in federal prison. 3 other TSA agents were charged as co-conspirators. They had participated in the detention without questioning Smith's authority, had helped process Igwe into the holding room, had witnessed the refusal to verify credentials, and said nothing. Their silence made them complicit. The DFW airport police officers who responded to the code red were cleared of wrongdoing. They had arrived to a reported terrorist threat and acted according to training. The false information had come from Smith. They were victims of his deception as much as instruments of Igwe's humiliation. The investigation's most damning finding concerned systemic failures. TSA had no meaningful accountability system for profiling complaints. Smith's 31 prior complaints had generated paperwork but no consequences. The $45,000 settlement had been sealed specifically to prevent pattern evidence from emerging. The institution had protected a discriminatory officer for 19 years. The trial began 14 months after Lieutenant Commander Reuben Igwe was forced face down onto the terminal floor at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. The federal courthouse in Dallas was packed every day, media filling the gallery, civil rights advocates and military veterans lining up before dawn to secure seats. The nation was watching. Igwe testified on the trial's second day. He wore his Navy SEAL dress uniform, the same uniform he had worn that December afternoon. The bent Bronze Star had been replaced, but every other medal remained exactly as it had been. He wanted the jury to see precisely what Smith had seen and rejected. The video evidence was played on 6 screens positioned throughout the courtroom, synchronized to show multiple angles simultaneously. The jury watched in absolute silence for 47 minutes. They saw Smith intercept Igwe at the checkpoint. They saw the documents examined and dismissed. They saw the code red called, the armed response, the decorated seal ordered to the ground at gunpoint. They saw his medals pressed into airport tile. They heard his calm voice explaining who he was, over and over, ignored every time. When the footage ended, 3 jurors were crying openly. Amara Igwe testified via closed-circuit video, a accommodation granted due to her age. She was 8 years old now, a year older than the little girl who had waited in arrivals for a father who never came. Her voice was small but steady. "I thought my daddy was dead." Her words cut through the courtroom. That's why he didn't come through the doors like everyone else. Then when I saw him, he had marks on his wrists. "I thought he was a criminal. I thought my daddy did something bad." She paused, her lip trembling. "My daddy is a hero. He saves people. Why did they hurt him?" Navy commanders testified to Igwe's heroism in sessions partially sealed for classified content. What the jury heard publicly was enough. 3 combat deployments, 6 lives saved under fire, the Navy Cross, a record of service that would humble most Americans. Smith's defense was predictable and hollow. His attorney argued he was just following protocol, protecting the airport, doing his job under difficult circumstances. He claimed the documents had appeared suspicious, that his instincts had been honed by years of experience. The prosecution destroyed this systematically. Protocol requires verification calls. You refused to make them. Protocol requires database checks. You ignored the results. Protocol does not include detaining American citizens for 4 hours based on the color of their skin. Expert witnesses testified on racial profiling, implicit bias, and constitutional rights. They explained how Smith's pattern of targeting minorities was consistent with documented discrimination, not legitimate security work. They detailed the statistical impossibility that 89% of his flagged passengers being people of color could occur by chance. 14 other victims of Smith testified about their experiences. Black businessmen pulled from security lines, brown families subjected to invasive searches, an Indian-American surgeon detained for 2 hours despite valid credentials. The pattern was undeniable. But the most devastating evidence was Smith's own words, captured on checkpoint audio, preserved forever. "No way that's real. "You people think you can just put on a uniform," and the phrase that sealed his fate, recorded when he thought no one important was listening, "No way a black guy is really a SEAL commander." The prosecution played that audio 3 times during closing arguments. The jury heard the bias stripped of all pretense, the assumption of fraud based on nothing but skin color, the dismissal of a hero's service because it didn't match a racist's expectations. The jury deliberated for 4 days. 4 days of reviewing 23 hours of footage from 14 official cameras and 47 civilian phones. 4 days of listening to audio recordings that captured every word Smith had spoken. 4 days of examining the pattern evidence from 31 prior complaints, the statistical analysis showing 89% of his targets were people of color, the emails proving supervisors knew and did nothing. When they returned, the courtroom fell silent. The foreman, a retired Air Force Master Sergeant who had served 24 years, stood to deliver the verdict. His hands were steady, but his voice carried the weight of what he was about to say. Guilty. On all counts. The courtroom erupted. Igwe sat motionless in his dress uniform, tears streaming down his face, surrounded by family and fellow Navy SEALs who had traveled from across the country to support him. His daughter Amara, watching from the gallery with her mother, didn't fully understand what guilty meant, but she understood that the people who had hurt her daddy were being punished. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Federal Judge Raymond Foster had presided over civil rights cases for 18 years. He had never seen evidence this comprehensive or conduct this egregious. "Mr. Smith, you swore an oath to protect travelers. Instead, you used your position to humiliate and demean American citizens based on the color of their skin. You detained a decorated war hero, a man who has sacrificed more for this country than you will ever understand, because your prejudice told you a black man couldn't possibly be a Navy SEAL commander. The court sentences you to 5 years in federal prison." Smith's 3 co-conspirators received sentences of 18 to 24 months each. Their silence had enabled his discrimination. Their complicity had consequences. The civil lawsuit against TSA and the Department of Homeland Security proceeded separately. The government's attorneys knew the evidence was indefensible. They had seen the footage, they had heard the audio, they had reviewed the pattern evidence that proved institutional failure. Settlement negotiations began before the civil trial's 3rd week concluded. The final number stunned the nation: $22.7 million, $12 million in compensatory damages covering Igwe's trauma, medical expenses, lost wages during his hospitalization, and permanent damage to his reputation and mental health. $10.7 million in punitive damages, calculated specifically to force systemic change within TSA. It was the largest TSA-related civil rights settlement in American history. The settlement included mandatory reforms that went far beyond financial compensation. New military verification protocols required TSA agents to call Pentagon authentication lines within 15 minutes of any credential question. Comprehensive profiling training became mandatory for all supervisors, with annual recertification requirements. Complaint review systems were overhauled, with independent investigators replacing internal review processes that had protected Smith for 19 years. An independent oversight board was established specifically for TSA discrimination complaints. Civilian members with civil rights expertise would review every allegation, with authority to recommend termination and criminal referral. The system that had buried 31 complaints against Smith would never function that way again. Lieutenant Commander Reuben Igwe used a portion of his settlement to establish the Igwe Foundation for Veterans Dignity. The organization provides free legal representation to military members facing discrimination, whether at airports, in workplaces, or in their communities. In its first 2 years, the foundation assisted 847 veterans with civil rights claims, recovering over $12 million in settlements and judgments. Igwe testified before Congress 3 times on TSA reform. He sat in his dress uniform before the House Homeland Security Committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, and a joint oversight hearing, describing what had happened to him and demanding systemic change. His testimony was credited with accelerating passage of the Veterans Airport Dignity Act, which codified many of the reforms from his settlement into federal law. The case became required training material for all TSA supervisors nationwide. New hires watch the footage during their first week. They see Smith's assumptions, his refusals to verify, his treatment of a decorated hero as a criminal. They hear his words. They learn what happens when bias overrides protocol. At the press conference announcing his foundation's launch, Igwe stood beside his daughter. Amara was 9 years old now, 2 years past the Christmas, when she had waited for a father who didn't come through the arrival's door. Reporters asked her what she wanted people to know about her daddy. She stepped to the microphone, her small voice carrying across the room. "My daddy is a hero. He saved 6 people in a war. He got medals for being brave, and now he helps other soldiers who get treated badly." She paused, looking up at her father. "My daddy fights for everyone." Igwe returned to active duty after his medical leave. 6 months later, he was promoted to commander, his career continuing despite the trauma Smith had inflicted. He still serves, still deploys, still wears the uniform that had made him a target. The footage from that December afternoon lives on in law schools, police academies, and civil rights archives. Professors use it to teach constitutional law. Trainers use it to demonstrate implicit bias. Advocates use it to prove that discrimination can be documented, prosecuted, and punished. 14 cameras captured what used to be denied and dismissed. 8 terminal cameras, 6 body cameras, 47 civilian phones. In another era, Smith's word would have stood against Igwe's. The decorated hero might have been dismissed as a complainer, his trauma minimized, his experience buried alongside 31 other complaints. But the cameras were rolling, every assumption recorded, every refusal documented, every moment of humiliation preserved in high definition. The technology meant to protect security personnel became the evidence that held them accountable. Body cameras work both ways. Terminal surveillance captures everyone. And in an age when every traveler carries a phone capable of recording HD video, discrimination happens in front of witnesses who never forget and footage that never lies. Henry Smith is serving his sentence in federal prison. He will be released in 3 years, a convicted felon, stripped of his pension, barred from federal employment forever. His name is synonymous with everything wrong with unchecked authority and racial bias. Commander Reuben Igwe continues to serve the nation that nearly broke him. His foundation has helped hundreds of veterans. His testimony has changed federal law. His daughter understands now that her father's heroism extends beyond battlefields. This case was brutal, but the case on the right spirals completely out of control.